So it seems we now live in a world where people have to be worried about the green M&M being too sexy because she wears slutty boots. I think we've crossed the line to where we are beyond parody now. But on the bright side, I did find a movie that made me laugh at something other than reality. Sorry, I couldn't think of a better cold open for this one. So, change of location. Got interrupted and the weekend was crazy. Well, anyway, you may be wondering what type of movie this is. Well, I will say it's not for everyone. However, I laughed harder at it than I have at any movie in years. It's gotten to the point where I no longer turn to films if I'm expecting to laugh because, I don't know, something's happened with films in the past 10 years or so where they're just not as funny as what I find on TV. Don't get me wrong, there are still things that can make me laugh when I watch them. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia being one of the few, but it's a lot harder these days for some reason. Well, The French Dispatch is a sort of surreal comedy. And if I had to compare it to anything, it would be the style of late 30s, early 40s Warner Brothers cartoons with a helping of Monty Python and Douglas Adams on top. This is the sort of movie where you can tell the filmmaker has a point of view, but it doesn't really intrude on the idea that everyone is insane and everyone is stupid in their own way, and let's just laugh at ourselves. That seems to be the attitude of this whole movie, which again is a very Monty Python, Douglas Adams-esque way of doing things. And the way that it's staged and shot is very Looney Tunes. One thing I will say for Wes Anderson is he's not afraid to play with the aspect ratio and lighting to get just the mood that he wants in a scene and keep your focus on exactly what he wants for his gag. The setup for the movie is ostensibly that there is a news magazine in the 1960s called the French Dispatch that's been going on for a long time, and the editor dies. So we see we see 4 stories that were being worked on for the news magazine when he died. One of them is a review of traveling in a town that was supposed to be a positive look at it, and despite the fact that almost everything said about the town is negative, the writer says it with such a positive manner. He doesn't really see it as a negative review that's going to hurt tourism. You then have a tale about an artist in prison whose model is one of in a sane asylum, whose model is one of the guards who is then being contracted by an outside art seller, and all the headaches that come with that, and eventually trying to get his art outside of a prison where they can do something for it. There's a great moment in this that I think sums up, that I think is a great satire of not only that is a great satire between the point of view of the artist and the person promoting and funding the production of their art. And when I say that this movie is very even-handed, this will give you some idea. On the one hand, you see that the art producer is corrupt, willing to pay out bribes, etc., etc., and he does put on a lot of pressure on the artist to produce. But in this one scene, he tells the artist that he's set up a exhibition for his latest work. Talks about how expensive it's been to set everything up because people have to come to the asylum to see his art, and he talks about just how much work he's put into making this all happen, only for the artist to say, "I need another year." he then looks at the sky and screams in rage. And you can't help but feel in this scene, both for the artist, who, yeah, you can't release, yeah, there's really no point in releasing a work of art that's incomplete, but you also at that moment feel for this promoter slash salesman who's doing this because you've seen how much trouble he's gone to, and you feel the frustration at that point. So that's what I mean when I say that it's very even-handed and fair to everyone. You also have a scene where he's trying to get the artist out of the insane asylum, but they say that he beheaded. But they say he beheaded two or three people. I forget the exact number. And there's a great line that pretty much sums up Hollywood, where the art dealer tries to plead on the artist's behalf by saying, "Yes, but he's an artist. Surely we must have a double standard for such a case." It's like the perfect satire of how Hollywood operates right there. You then go on to a funny thing where that satire is not only protesters but government responses to protesters, and some college students are protesting, but we never actually find out what they're protesting in favor of. We never actually find out why they're having to protest this very weird, surreal protest, because it's really not important to the story. And this is the part where in the movie I thought, since they were doing student protesters, we would probably get some sort of preaching on the part of the movie, and they would use this to take up some cause, and the students would be fighting for some, because that's typical Hollywood filmmaking right there. But no, all that's important to the story is that students are protesting, so we're never told exact 100% what they want. They're arguing over the contents of a manifesto, but we never actually hear the manifesto. We just hear them arguing over, in section 17, paragraph 4, and it's just like, that needs to change, but they never say what it is that needs to change, and the students come off as slightly self-absorbed, and but then one of them gets himself immortalized by being an idiot. When they're about to broadcast their manifesto on the radio, and they get knocked out, he goes up to the radio tower without turning off the live wires. I think you can see where this goes. And then at the last stop, you have a food critic who was just supposed to review a chef's cooking, but then got tied in with the most bizarre kidnapping and chase scene I have seen on TV on my TV screen in a long time. And it's really fun. There's a really great animated bit in this, and there's a bit in it where it feels very, very Monty Python-esque in a chase scene that happens during this whole kidnapping plot. In that two cars are chasing each other. They stop. Everybody gets out. They run away. They run around, chase each other. They chase each other back to their cars. They all get in the exact same position they were in, and then they drive off after each other as though they hadn't gotten out of the car and been running around and shooting at each other. Everything just resumes as though that stop never happened. And that gives you some idea of what the humor is like in this movie. There's a lot of verbal humor, but there's also a lot of humor that has to do with staging and the way people walk. I compare it closest, if I had to pick an early Looney Tunes director that this reminded me of the whole time, it would have to be Chuck Jones, in that frames seem to be very centered, and there is this humor of people just like entering the frame and then walking in this very stiff manner, and people will sneak, and their whole body will be stiff, and it really says something about the talent of the performers and of Wes Anderson's direction, that he managed to get these such exaggerated performances that you can normally only see from the best animators out of live actors who you'll see somebody and they'll be like perfectly straight except for their legs that are moving across the screen, moving across the room. Or a perfect example is during the artist prison segment, where at one point the art critic, he finds out there's a prison riot going outside the room he's in. He opens the door, all the rioters stop in whatever awkward pose they're in, and they're just frozen, and all their heads turn at once to look at the door he's opened. But they all turn in unison like this. It's very animation. It's very much looks like animation. And then he closes the door, locks it, and then exactly 1 second later, the wall around the door has been pushed over by the prisoners, but the door is just standing there. So that's the type of humor you'll encounter, and I don't want to give everything away because part of the joy of comedy is seeing the gags play out and having the gags surprise you the first time you watch it. But I found everyone's performances to be pitch perfect. The direction was pitch perfect. It's interesting in that this is a film with artistic ambitions, but it's also just trying to be a comedy that makes you laugh. And it sort of takes you, and that's another way that I would say it compares favorably, that it seems to have taken inspiration from those old Looney Tunes shorts. In its staging and direction and performance, it's very old school Looney Tunes. In the type of humor that it has, it's very Monty Python. So if that sounds like something that'll appeal to you, yeah, this is definitely a 4 out of 5 movie. I can honestly say this is a 4 out of 5 star movie, and it's definitely one of the more enjoyable films I have seen in a while. And I watched this with other people, and they enjoyed it. And so I know the advertising makes it look like the advertising isn't really doing it justice, in that it just makes it look like some artsy fartsy piece that isn't about anything, but it is about something, and it's not a stiff. It is very artistic, but it's not the stiff sort of artistic where it's not loaded on its own sense of self-importance. It's bloated on trying to put together all these gags, and if that sounds like it's something you'll enjoy, check it out. It's all over the place. You can get it at, hell, go to Redbox. That's where I got it to try it. $2 is well worth it. You'll definitely enjoy it more than most things that are in theaters right now. So The French Dispatch, 4 out of 5 stars. Really good. You'll enjoy yourself and have some good laughs.